Picture a biology classroom. The teacher draws a straight arrow on the board. Organism to organism, generation to generation. Reproduce, pass genes, survive, repeat. That's the game. That's literally all evolution cares about. And then someone in the back row raises their hand and asks the one question nobody really wants to answer out loud. So, why do gay people still exist? The teacher pauses. The room goes quiet, because this is a real question. Not a political one, not a moral one, a genuine, cold, biological puzzle that has kept scientists quietly uncomfortable for over a century. If evolution selects for traits that help organisms pass genes to the next generation, then a sexual orientation that doesn't lead to offspring, at least not directly, should have disappeared a very long time ago. The math doesn't work. And yet here we are, in every culture, every era, every corner of the human record, finding the same pattern. Same-sex attraction, consistent, persistent, stubbornly refusing to go extinct. The short answer is, we don't fully know yet. The long answer is what this video is about, and it's stranger, more fascinating, and honestly a little embarrassing for the people who thought they'd already figured it out. Let's start with why this is even a paradox in the first place. Because a lot of people hear the question and immediately think, oh, this is easy. This is just homophobia dressed up as science. And look, that's a fair instinct. This topic has a messy, ugly history of being weaponized. But the biological puzzle is real, and ignoring it doesn't make it go away. It just leaves the answer in the hands of people with worse intentions. So, the core of evolutionary logic is something called reproductive fitness. It's not about strength or intelligence or beauty in the abstract. It's about whether your traits show up in the next generation. A trait that reliably reduces reproduction should, over enough generations, get filtered out. That's the engine. That's what Darwin's machine does. And yet, same-sex behavior has been documented in over 1,500 animal species. 1,500 penguins, bottlenose dolphins, bonobos, giraffes, bighorn sheep, lions. The list goes on and goes weird fast. This is not a human invention. This is not a modern phenomenon. This is something so old, so widespread, and so consistent across the animal kingdom that evolutionary biologists have had to stop calling it an anomaly. It's not an anomaly. It is a feature of life on Earth. Let that sit with you for a second. Here's where it gets genuinely fascinating, because if you accept that same-sex attraction has a genetic component and the evidence strongly suggests it does, then you immediately run into what scientists call the Darwinian paradox. How does a trait with a genetic basis persist if it reduces the chance of passing those very genes on? In 2019, a landmark study published in Science analyzed the DNA of nearly 500,000 people. 500,000. They identified multiple genetic variants associated with same-sex behavior, no single gay gene, but a constellation of small genetic influences spread across the genome. This is important. It means the genetics of sexual orientation is genuinely complex, diffuse, and almost certainly intertwined with other traits that evolution does favor. And that's the key. The genes don't exist in isolation. They hitch a ride. Think about it like this. Imagine a gene variant that, in one combination, nudges a person toward same-sex attraction. But in a different combination in a sibling, a cousin, in the other sex, that same variant does something else entirely. Maybe it increases empathy. Maybe it enhances certain social skills. Maybe, and this is the part researchers keep coming back to, it significantly increases fertility in women who carry it. That last one is not speculation. It's data. One of the most compelling explanations evolutionary biologists have proposed is something called kin selection, or, in its more specific form, when applied here, the gay uncle hypothesis. It sounds almost too cute to be real, but it's serious science. The idea goes like this. Your genes don't care about you specifically. They care about copies of themselves surviving. And copies of your genes exist in your siblings, your nieces, your nephews. If a person who doesn't reproduce directly instead invests enormous time, energy, and resources into helping close relatives raise their children, children who share a significant portion of their genes, that's still a genetic win. The genes propagate, just through a different route. Researchers in Samoa studied the fa'afafine, A third gender category that includes people we'd broadly recognize as gay men and found something remarkable. The Fa'afafine showed significantly higher levels of what they called avuncular tendencies. They were more likely to babysit, tutor, protect, and invest in their siblings' children than heterosexual men or women in the same communities. They remembered birthdays. They showed up. They were, by multiple measurable metrics, exceptional aunts and uncles. Now multiply that across human evolutionary history. Tens of thousands of years of extended family units, small hunter-gatherer bands where every extra pair of capable hands meant the difference between a child surviving and a child not surviving. The gay uncle isn't a quirk. The gay uncle might be a feature. That is not a consolation prize. That is a survival strategy. But kin selection alone doesn't fully close the math. So let's talk about the other side of this, because this is the part that genuinely surprised researchers when the numbers came in. Multiple studies across different populations in Italy, in Brazil, in Western Europe have found the same pattern. The female relatives of gay men tend to have more children than average. Mothers, aunts, sisters. They reproduce at higher rates, which means the genetic variants associated with same-sex attraction in men may simultaneously be boosting fertility in women who carry the same genes. This is called sexually antagonistic selection. A trait that reduces fitness in one sex gets maintained in the population because it increases fitness in the other. Evolution is running two programs at once on the same code. A 2004 study by Andrea Camperio-Ciani at the University of Padova found that the maternal relatives of gay men had, on average, significantly more children than the maternal relatives of straight men. The effect was specifically on the maternal line, which matches the genetic pattern, because the X chromosome is passed through mothers. The numbers weren't small. We're talking a meaningful reproductive advantage. So what you may be looking at is a genetic package deal. The same cluster of variants that can, in one configuration, produce same-sex attraction in a man, can, in another configuration, make a woman exceptionally likely to find partners, form bonds, and have children. Evolution keeps the whole package because the package, on average, wins. Let that sink in. Let's take a step back from humans for a moment. Because the animal behavior data is where things get philosophically interesting in a way that nobody talks about enough. In species after species, same-sex behavior doesn't look like a malfunction. It doesn't look like confusion. It looks, for all the world, like it's doing something. Bonobos use same-sex contact to resolve conflict, cement social bonds, and reduce tension within the group. Female bonobos engage in same-sex behavior constantly. It is one of their primary social tools. And bonobos are one of our two closest living relatives, the other being chimpanzees, who also exhibit same-sex behavior. Bottlenose dolphins form long-term same-sex pair bonds between males. These bonds are stable, affectionate, and appear to serve a function in the social hierarchy of dolphin groups, male coalitions that cooperate to protect each other, and, interestingly, to compete more effectively for female attention when the time comes. The pair bond is the foundation. It is not incidental. Bighorn sheep rams mount each other with a frequency that initially baffled researchers. In some populations, a significant minority of rams showed persistent preference for other males, even when females were available. Biologists called them effeminate rams for a while, which tells you more about the biologists than the sheep, before eventually accepting that this variation was stable, heritable, and apparently not causing the population to collapse. 1,500 species, every continent, across hundreds of millions of years of evolution. At some point, the burden of proof shifts. You stop asking why it exists, and you start asking what it's for. Now, here's the part that makes the story even more complicated and more interesting, because genes are not the only mechanism at play here. In recent years, researchers have turned their attention to epigenetics, the way environmental signals during development can switch genes on or off without changing the underlying DNA sequence. And there's a growing body of evidence suggesting that some aspects of sexual orientation may be influenced by epigenetic markers that are laid down during fetal development. A 2015 study by researchers including William Rice at UC Santa Barbara proposed that epimarks epigenetic instructions that normally help buffer a developing fetus against hormonal fluctuations in the womb could, under certain conditions, be incompletely erased between generations. Normally, these marks reset, but if they carry over, A mark that helped a female fetus develop properly in a high testosterone environment could, in a male descendant, influence the sensitivity of certain brain regions to hormones in ways that affect sexual orientation. This model is called the epigenetic canalization hypothesis, and it's controversial. The science is not settled, but it offers something important: a mechanism by which the trait can appear, persist, and vary across generations without being directly encoded in a stable gene sequence. It's not just in the DNA, it's in the margins, in the annotations, in the instructions written between the lines. Your body is more complicated than your genes, way more complicated. Let's talk about the human record, because one of the arguments you'll still hear less often now, but still, is that same-sex relationships are a modern invention, a Western export, a product of permissive culture. This is historically illiterate. The archaeological and anthropological record is unambiguous. Ancient Greece didn't just tolerate same-sex relationships, it had entire philosophical frameworks built around them. The concept of Erastes and Eramenos, the mentor and the beloved, was a formalized social institution. Plato wrote about it. Sappho of Lesbos, writing around 600 BCE, left behind some of the most achingly beautiful love poetry in human history, addressed to women. The word lesbian is literally named after her island. In ancient Rome, same-sex relationships were documented across all social classes. The Emperor Hadrian built a city, an entire city named after his male companion, Antinous. After Antinous drowned in the Nile, he deified him. He put his face on coins. If that's not a statement, I don't know what is. In Japan, the tradition of pseudo-romantic relationships between samurai and their younger male apprentices was documented and culturally accepted for centuries. In indigenous cultures across North America, two-spirit people, individuals who embodied both masculine and feminine roles and often formed same-sex relationships, held recognized, often sacred, social roles in their communities. This is not a trend. This is not a deviation. This is a thread that runs through the entire human tapestry, from the oldest civilizations we've found to the newest cities we've built. It was always there. We just kept trying to look away. And here's the gut punch. For most of recorded history, and still today in many parts of the world, being openly gay was not a social inconvenience. It was a death sentence. Criminalization, torture, execution, conversion, erasure. For centuries, in culture after culture, enormous institutional force was directed at suppressing, punishing, and eliminating same-sex attraction from the human population. And it didn't work. Think about what that means from an evolutionary standpoint. Natural selection is powerful, but human persecution is also powerful. Pogroms, inquisitions, legal codes going back to Leviticus, colonial laws exported across entire continents. Generations of people who were gay either died or were forced to have heterosexual children they may not have wanted, or went into hiding so deep that their entire inner lives became invisible. And still, every generation, new gay people, new same-sex attraction, consistent percentages, as far back as we can measure. The trait does not suppress, it does not breed out, it keeps coming back, because it is not a cultural preference, or a social contagion, or a choice that can be unmade. It is something written into the biology of a species in enough different ways, genetic, epigenetic, developmental, that no amount of external pressure has managed to remove it. That should tell you something. That should tell you quite a lot. So where does all of this leave us? The honest answer is, in a genuinely interesting place. Not a resolved place. Not a science has spoken place. But a place where the evidence is pointing consistently in one direction toward the conclusion that same-sex attraction is not a bug in the human operating system. It is, in the most literal biological sense, a feature, one that has been maintained across species, across millennia, across every attempt to extinguish it because it is doing something, multiple somethings, probably. The kin selection angle, the female fertility link, the epigenetic complexity, the social bonding function, the developmental variation, none of these alone fully closes the paradox. Together, they paint a picture of a trait so deeply woven into the fabric of what humans are that asking why does it exist may be the wrong question entirely. Maybe the better question is, what would we lose without it? The gay uncle who raised your ancestors' children while everyone else was hunting, the fa'afafine who remembered every child's name in the village, the female relatives who, carrying the same genetic constellation, had more children than anyone else in the band. The bonobos resolving conflict without violence. The dolphin coalitions that held together through years of open ocean, the philosophers and poets and emperors who built cities for love and left us the words to understand what love even is. You are here reading this in part because of all of them. Let that sit with you. Here's the thing about the classroom from the beginning. The teacher who paused when the question was asked, they paused not because the question was dangerous. They paused because the answer is complicated, and complicated answers require courage to give honestly. Science is slowly getting there. Imperfectly, messily, with all of its human biases baked in, but getting there. What we know is this. Same-sex attraction is ancient. It is biological. It is persistent across every attempt to remove it. It has genetic roots, epigenetic dimensions, developmental complexity, and probable evolutionary function. It is found in every documented human culture and in over 1,500 animal species. And the people who experience it have been, throughout human history, teachers, warriors, artists, parents, uncles, aunts, friends, and the quiet infrastructure of communities that might not have survived without them. That is not a malfunction. That is a legacy. And the next time someone asks that question in the back row of a biology class, maybe the answer is simpler than we thought. Maybe they exist for the same reason everything exists. Because they work. So, here's the question I'll leave you with, and I genuinely want to know what you think. If you could go back, just for one day, to a prehistoric human band, a small group of maybe 30 or 40 people on the African savanna, do you think you'd be able to spot who the gay uncle was? And what do you think they were doing? Leave it in the comments. I'll be down there reading.